Earlier this month, though, as we await this next press conference and my colleagues stand by, the Liberal government promised a one-time payment of up to $600 to help Canadians living with disabilities in the midst of this pandemic. The legislation that was intended to put that in place did not go forward last week because of the opposition parties. It didn't get enough support. And so for now, they are trying to work out another way to get money to Canadians who are living with disabilities. Krista Carr is the Executive Vice President of the Canadian Association for Community Living, and she joins me now. Thank you for being here, Ms. Carr.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking me.
So the legislation, unfortunately, did not get passed last week. And I say unfortunately because many Canadians with disabilities have tweeted me saying that they do need some additional money. And I certainly know the government is committed to getting it to them, but it is going to take a little bit longer. So maybe you can just tell me what you're hearing from people about how quickly and how much they need this additional support.
Well, I guess from the beginning of this pandemic, as national disability organizations, we've been just overrun with calls of people with disabilities in crisis. I mean, we have to understand that so many people with a disability already live in precarious situations, live in poverty, are the working poor, face discrimination and lack of support on so many levels. And this pandemic has just basically taken that to a whole another level of crisis, including families of children with disabilities. And so we've advocated since the very beginning of this pandemic as national disability organizations for financial support to assist Canadians with disabilities and their families.
And the $600, again, I have had lots of people reach out. One gentleman in particular said to me, this will actually make a huge difference. What would that additional support be needed for right now? Is it the same kinds of things that, for instance, seniors are having to use as well? Additional transportation, deliveries, that kind of thing?
Yes, many of the same things. Personal protective equipment.
Sure.
For yourself and for the people who support you. Many people with disabilities have people coming in and out of their homes on a regular basis to provide supports. It's additional cost of groceries, it's deliveries, it's not being able to use public transportation anymore. And even many of the in-kind services that exist within communities that people with disabilities rely on, like Wi-Fi access at libraries or Tim Hortons or food banks that provide them additional groceries. Many of those have either closed down, even many food banks have closed down or do not have the level of food available to support people. And so they're just varying levels of all kinds of additional expenses, additional costs of services and supports and workers, and paying workers to only work with one individual as opposed to working in other locations so that they can help themselves stay safe or their family stay safe.
So the way the government was going to identify how to get this money to the people that needed it was through the disability tax credit, and the information of who benefits from that, who has access to it. But I know that you and others have concerns that maybe doesn't hit everybody, that the disability tax credit in itself is maybe not a broad enough swath of people.
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would say is that the announcement of the financial support to people with disabilities was certainly a welcome first step, and a relief, I guess, on the part of the disability community that there was a recognition by the federal government that this was a community in need. And we've seen all kinds of payments go out the door to other populations in need as well. Now, having said that, the disability it's a bit of a complicated situation because the federal government doesn't have a financial income relationship with Canadians with disabilities in the same way they do, for example, with seniors through older security. They don't have that direct income relationship. And so they have the disability tax credit, they have Canada Pension Plan Disability, they have the Veterans with Disabilities benefit, and some other small peripheral things. And there are approximately 6 million Canadians with a disability. And 1.25 million of them qualify for the disability tax credit. And that's 1.25 million people who are going to get desperately needed financial support. And again, as I mentioned, welcome, but it does leave out a significant number of Canadians with a disability. And so many organizations like mine and others have advocated, is there an alternate mechanism to get the money to people? Could we do a federal provincial transfer where the money would go to, people living on income assistance, disability income assistance in the provinces and territories?
Yeah.
But of course, that also brings difficulties because provincial governments have shown, with the exception of BC and a couple territories, that by and large they're clawing back at least partially or mostly all of any benefits thus far that people with a disability living on income assistance in their province and territory are able to qualify for. And so federal provincial territorial relations are difficult, and the federal government I don't think was as anxious to get into a situation where the money wouldn't actually end up in the hands of people with disabilities.
Right, or to have to negotiate again with the provinces through something for shared jurisdiction. Okay, well, Ms. Carr, as I say, such an important issue, and I have been told the government's still committed to doing it. It's just a matter of how and, of course, when. So we'll keep on the story. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Appreciate it. That's Krista Carr in Fredericton, Executive Vice President of the Canadian Association for Community Living. Okay.